Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of The Music Done. I'm your host, Armando Venditti. Hoping you guys are having a good day. And above all else, that you are looking after yourselves and one another. Ladies and gentlemen, before I get into the topic for this episode, I'd like to welcome back to the channel Mr. Ken Cheshire. How's it going, Ken?
Going well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming back. And the schizophrenic man of the hour, Mr. Jim Bricker. How's it going, Jim?
You're going to start to develop a rep for me, and I don't know how I feel about this, Mr. Venditti. We're going to have a talk.
No problem. No problem. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with Buried Treasures, episode 3. Jim's musically schizophrenic reaction. Now, if you remember, we did an episode called Buried Treasures where we talked about 5 quote unquote obscure albums. Uh, Jim gave me 5 albums to listen to, which I did. They were wonderful, covering different musical genres. I, in turn, gave Jim an additional 5 albums that are quote unquote obscure that we both believed deserved some more attention and discussion. So, Jim has come back for episode 3, and he's going to give us his view on the 5 albums that I gave him. And at the end of this episode, Ken is going to chime in with 5 of his own albums for both Jim and I to listen to. And then we're going to come back with a fourth installment of Buried Treasures and give him our opinions on his list of 5 quote unquote obscure albums. So without further ado, as I look on my screen, I will pass the virtual mic down to Jim and he will take it away with his opinion on the 5 obscure albums. There you go, Jim.
Well, all right. Okay, even though apparently I'm schizophrenic, I'll try to be cogent and clear and crisp in my reactions to these things.
I have no
So,
doubt.
well, let's just see about that. All right,
Okay. All
we're
right.
going to start. Uh, I do not recall the exact order, Armando, that you presented them in, but I'm just going to go with this list how I have it here.
Yes.
So we're going to start with Gowan, the 1993 album that you recommended, and it was titled "But You Can Call Me Larry," if I do have that right.
Yes, you
So
do.
my reaction, I'm going to speak about most of these albums just kind of overall in general. Um, the Gowan album um it was nice. It was good. Um there's kind of nothing wrong with it per se, but I found somehow that there's like a lack of something going on that says I want to hear that again. I don't know for me if it was just like um there wasn't enough melodically or harmonically to kind of take it to the next level. Um, you know, I don't know if it's fair, but let's compare like something like Crowded House. I mean, this is the Gowan record is a pop record. It's got, some, rock and sort of proggy, undertones and undercurrents through it, but it's pretty much a pop record. Um, the reason to talk about Crowded House to me, and it may be a little unfair because like the first Crowded House album is just a masterclass in pop songwriting and vocal harmonies and catchy hooks and all that kind of stuff. And to me on the Gowan record, it kind of lacked a lot of those things that sort of make for pop rock perfection. Um, it sounded very much like 1993, and it was like I said, it was nice, it was good, but there was a sense for me for kind of like I felt like I had been there and heard that before. um but I am open to hearing maybe something that I missed. Is there something about this, Armando, that maybe is kind of like skipping off the surface for me and I should like reconsider?
I think with this album, Lawrence Gowan, who at that point he was going by Lawrence Gowan, I think he wanted to move into more an acoustic live instrumentation arena with regards to the production on the album. I mean, when you've got Jerry Marotta as one of the producers of the album, you're dealing with, um, some high caliber talent there. Um,
Yep.
I think again, and you've got people on there like Tony Levin, who's worked with him since like 1985 on his albums, and Robert Fripp. And it's got to be said, Lawrence Gowan is a major Yes and King Crimson fan in terms of his musical influences. I
And he's the
think,
he's the current vocalist in Styx, is he not?
yes, since
And keyboard player?
1999. Yes,
Yeah, okay.
yes, ladies and gentlemen, he took over for Dennis DeYoung in 1999 at the request of Tommy Shaw to join the band, and he has been with them since 1999. Um, I think he again was looking to move into more a live instrumentation, more acoustic based type of musical setting, as it were.
Hmm.
The songs like on the album, like "When There's Time for Love," um, I think hits the mark perfectly
Hmm.
for what he wants to accomplish. I do agree with you that, and reflecting on it, I do agree with you that maybe he went too far to the left as opposed to staying on the road in the center. Do you know what I mean? Like not going veering too far
Okay.
either direction. Dancing on My Own Ground, which was the second single, I think that's a good pop oriented track. Very uplifting, very hopeful track in terms of reaffirming one's
Sure.
own belief in themselves and going down a path. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Um,
and I found the record to actually be very positive
yes,
in that frame. I enjoyed it
yes.
from that standpoint.
Mhm. But yeah, I do agree with you that there is something missing, although I don't know what would make it, you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? There is something missing, but you just don't know what that one thing is. Do you know, if that makes any sense to you.
Yeah.
I do agree with you with that.
Okay.
I do
Okay.
agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, if there were another Gowan album slipped to me, I would take a listen to it. So I'm not turned off at all. It just kind of sounded like, by the numbers to me.
We'll talk off camera.
Okay.
Hmm.
Yes. Let's move on to the second one then, for which we might also talk off camera.
Go on.
So this is FM, the Black Noise album, which is from 1978, and this was their debut.
Yes.
Okay. So, in parts, well, first of all, I was unfamiliar with the entire album except for Phasers on Stun.
Oh,
I had heard that before, but I can't picture when. Um, and for me, that was one of the standouts, as was Dialing for Dharma and Hours. To me, are the standouts on that album. Um, And to me, there's a lot on this album that kind of reminds me in bits and places about like Alan Parsons Project or Kansas or UK. And, I'm not just saying that because of the violin. There's something musically going on about this that kind of, you know, reminds me of that. And it's because of that that it just feels to me like FM. It feels like high schoolers trying to do prog.
ooh,
Now, so I have some very vivid memories in in junior high and high school of seeing students come out and, really, really talented, and they would play, you know, Skinner, Boston, some things, and they would really do a fantastic job of it. But you could kind of tell is that, these are guys that are they haven't found their own voice, but they're really good at other people's voices. And to me, the FM band reminds me of that. And there's another thing about it that sort of came into my head as I was saying about it. The sound production on this album is
hmm.
it's a little muddy. And to me, that's another reason why it kind of sounded, a bit amateurish. However, having said that, Phasers on Stun, Dialing for Dharma, Hours, I'm not going to deny that those are some really, really good songs. And I would probably work my way toward listening to this again. Um, and I think I did listen to it twice, maybe three times, just to sort of get my arms around, exactly what my opinion was of it and why. Um, it's, I gave it like 6.5, 7 out of 10 as far as, my own notes and ranking there.
And that's a pretty good ranking, seeing as how you described it to me. Like
Well,
teenagers
yeah,
doing, yeah, okay, teenagers doing prog. Okay. All right. All right.
obviously it's in the circles that we travel, from a prog musical standpoint. I mean, we talk about it ad infinitum. You've got Yes, you've got Genesis, you've got Crimson, you've got ELP. Good Lord, it's hard to compete with those bands and feel like you can get a foothold to find something that's like unique territory and like really definitive. Um, so it's like anything going up against or trying to travel in those same circles is not quite a fool's errand,
Yeah. No, no, no.
but
Just to add to what you said, I can understand how you feel in terms of the production being somewhat muddy.
hmm
I think Cameron's vocals are somewhat buried in the mix.
hmm
Um, with regards to phases on Stun. First of all, I love that track overall. I think it's a unique piece of music.
oh, it's fun,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, that album was recorded at CBC Studios. You know, it
Okay.
was done on a basically pretty much on a shoestring budget. And as I said, they weren't even given copies of the album. The album was given away to contest winners on CBC radio when it was done at the time. So
Okay.
it was not even released to record stores as an album to sell. So
hmm
FM's start into the music business was um, kind of like a helter-skelter kind of thing. It wasn't done proper. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that album is a buried treasure because not a lot of people know about it.
Mhm.
It's been issued on Visa Records, on I believe Passport Records. Also, Esoteric did a reissue of it in 2016, which I do have. But yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, well, it's fair. Your assessment is fair. I've got nothing to bite against in terms of your assessment. It's fine.
Okay. I have a feeling the biting will commence next.
Go
Um,
on.
Go on. Let's talk about Max Webster and the album that which is kind of called Hangover, I think, maybe outside of Canada.
It's
Um,
Hangover in the US. Yeah.
Hangover in the US. Okay. So let's start with the positives. Um, to me, I think there's like, well, like Summer Turning Blue, that's a pretty darn good tune. Hangover has a fun riff to it. Toronto's Tontos is goofy and kind of fun. To me, it probably worked better live than it does on the album. It just kind of feels like, you know, a joke that not everyone gets, but fun if you're sort of in the room and having it all play together. Blowing the Blues Away, I think is a pretty darn good stab at power pop, and there's some interesting melodic catches going on the album. But I don't know. There's something about this that just it felt like I could not find my entry point into it. Maybe I'm a victim of my own expectations for what I was hoping to get out of this album. Um, there were several other people that I spoke with and trying to sort of find my way in who said, "Yeah, Hangovers and Max Webster is pretty good, but their second one was better, or this one was better, or that one was better." So I felt like maybe I wasn't getting the creme de la creme of Max Webster. They're just maybe I'm just too much of a you jerk for a melody. or something to sort of hang on to, some sort of melodic hook, which is pretty funny given I saw Dweezil Zappa 2 nights ago. Um,
I'm glad
but
you pointed that out.
see, I yes,
No, no, no.
I'm trying
Continue,
to if I'm
continue.
if I'm being schizophrenic, I want to be fairly schizophrenic
Your
about it.
points are valid, dear sir. Your points are valid. Keep going.
Yeah. So again, I think I'm gonna probably give this like another 6.5 out of 10. There's some good stuff going on here. I just think for me, this was not the right entry point or venue, audio venue, if you will, to kind of experience Max Webster at, because a lot of people say, "Oh, Kim Mitchell, Max Webster, oh, it's just great," and I'm like, I'm not seeing the same greatness that you guys are. It's good, but you know,
When
there's my
people
review.
when people talk about Max Webster, they talk about the album High Class and Borrowed Shoes
Yes.
from 1977. They talk about A Million Vacations. Um, they talk about Mutiny Up My Sleeve, I believe it's called. But they rarely talk about the debut, self-titled in
Hmm.
Canada, Hangover in the US, released on Mercury in the US at the time. For me, I think that the debut is a good slice of, mm, I'd say, mid to late 70s pop slash rock
Hmm.
um, in terms of the songs like Lily, which is one of the more proggiest tracks on the album, the final track. Toronto Tantos for me was just a it's a good comedic diversion.
Hmm.
It's indescribable to some people. So I mean that's why I like it because it's so unique.
Hmm.
I just wanted to give you an album that again which would fit the title of the episode, Buried Treasures, an album that, you know, isn't usually discussed when people mention the name Max Webster. I do believe, and I will go on record as saying that I do believe that Kim Mitchell as a guitarist does not get mentioned enough because I do think he's a
Hmm.
fantastic guitarist. And as a vocalist, I don't think he gets enough credit as a vocalist. So that's why I wanted to give you that, just to give you a bit of a left turn there. So, but
Hmm.
your assessment is fair.
Okay. All right.
Imagination but
Schizophrenic
fair.
but fair.
Hmm,
All right. So let me move on to number 4.
go on.
This is, and I, hang on. I need to, no, I'm not going to check something. Sound of Contact, Dimensionaut. And you'll have to forgive me right now. It's Sound of Contact is the band, right? And
Yes.
Dimensionaut is the album. Okay. Gotcha. This is from 2013, and this is actually an album that I had heard before on the recommendation of someone else. And he found his way to this album because the drummer for this album is Simon Collins, not Nick Collins, but Simon Collins. So one of the other sons of Mr. Phil.
Yes.
And one of the neat things about this album was that there was only one track to me that sounded like Phil Collins. Just the way that the guy was approaching um, doing kind of the beat and sort of moving things melodically on the toms. There was one track that sounded like it was like straight from the Phil Collins book, but otherwise, Simon Phillips was a delight to listen to, and this whole album is a delight. I give it a solid 8 out of 10. It's it's a really fantastic
Simon
listen. It
Simon Collins. You were
Yes, what did I say?
Simon Phillips.
Oh, well, hey, speaking of great drummers,
There you
yeah,
go.
Simon
There you
Collins.
Sorry.
But however, I'm gonna
All right.
go I'm gonna go Book of Revelation on y'all.
Oh
I
Lord.
hold I hold this against the album. And for folks who don't know the allusion there in the Book of Revelation, you know, I'll get okay. Here's your Bible lesson for today. Jesus talks about a bunch of letters to the churches saying, you guys do this well, this well, this well. However, I hold this against you. And so this is my I hold this against you point for Dimensionaut. I really, really listened hard to see if there was anything in this album that was not in 4/4, and I couldn't find anything. Now, that doesn't
Okay.
mean it's a bad album, but to me, that's like the one key element of prog that was just missing from this.
Okay.
There was lots of interesting things going on with feel within the 4/4. There were lots of like shifting tempos, but it wasn't like you had measures of 7/8 thrown in here or something that went in waltz time or something like that. It was all 4/4 throughout. So to me, that's why I call this like a rock album with prog overtones, as opposed to just being, yes, this is a solid prog album.
Okay.
Now, having said all that, it's a solid 8 out of 10. I would listen to this thing again. I really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. My
Ken,
introduction.
hang on. Ken has come off mic, so this is a momentous
Yeah, yeah,
moment.
yeah.
I think he has
Sorry,
something to
sorry.
share.
Do you, Ken? We've been
I,
monopolizing the conversation. Go ahead.
I just think, well, I understand what you're saying about the time signatures, but to me that seems very picky.
It is. It is. I am picking at
I mean,
nits.
little small hairs there splitting.
But basically, what you're saying is what's missing from this album is a variety in terms of style, in terms of musical style, in terms of time signature, etc.
Well, that element of style, yes. I
Okay.
mean, there's lots of tracks that have bombast, quiet moments, sweeping sort of things. And I guess to me, I wanted to call it prog, but it's like I kept listening for that thing that just made it a little bit different than like the best Journey album I've ever heard.
Dream after dream. Go on.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right, Ken. I am splitting hairs here, and this is probably because I was trying to think, is this a prog album or is this a rock album?
well, to me,
Mhm.
And
that's like saying something's not um, is not prog because it doesn't have a mellotron. That's just one of many um,
Mhm.
common elements, but
Yes,
not to me. That's not necessarily um, the camel that broke the back, or the straw that
yeah,
broke the camel's back.
Yeah.
So, so I
Would you
probably
say
wouldn't have thought of that.
that, Jim, that maybe they were overreaching too much in their attempt to do a prog album?
no, I don't, I don't think so. I mean, I like what's there. I like it a lot.
Hmm.
I listened to this album just sitting down. I listened to it while I was on a walk. I listened to it while I was driving. So I had all kinds of different ways that I was experiencing that, and no matter what I was doing, I enjoyed it, thoroughly. Again, this may just be, the anal retentive part of me trying to figure out how to classify this thing. I
Okay.
wanted to classify it as prog, but it's like there's that one thing that was kind of missing there.
Okay.
I guess similarly, nah, I don't want to stretch the metaphor. Anyway, it
Um,
was really good. I recommend Dimensionaut without reservation.
well, I'll tell you my discovery of it. It was the same as I did with Joni Mitchell. I was looking for new music to listen to, and I just came across this on um online on Google and looking at Genesis stuff, kind of thing.
Hmm.
And it mentioned this group, Sound of Contact and Simon Collins, and mentioned that they did a new album. And I went to the record store the next day when HMV was around here still, and oh, we have that album, and I picked it up and put it on, and it's bombast, it's pop in spots, it's rock and others, and I liked it. I mean,
Hmm.
last track being 19 minutes long. If that's not prog, I don't know what the hell is in terms of its
Well,
length.
that's
You know what I
and that's the
mean?
thing I kept struggling with. It's like
Yeah,
there's all
yeah,
kinds of things going on in terms of color, timbre, time,
yes,
lyrical themes that all kind of, it's like prog, 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 but it's like, where's the odd time signatures? And again, that just says more about
yeah,
my
yeah,
hangups and my personal issues. And
yeah.
folks, you can contribute to my counseling by sending a check to,
Yes, Armando Venditti. No, I'm kidding.
yes.
Um, it's for the good of Jim. No, in terms of Sound of Contact, the band have only released one album. Simon Collins has left the group. As of 2016, he's released one solo album, which I do have in the basement. And I listened to the solo album, and the name escapes me right now, but I listened to the solo album, and there was just something missing. I was expecting
Mm,
the bombast of Sound of Contact, and it just wasn't there. So
mm,
at this point, there was no future plans for another Sound of Contact album. They are still listed as being active, but Dimensionaut is the only album released also on Inside Out Music through Sony, I should say. So a major label distribution there, but there's no announcement for a new album as of yet.
mhm.
So, which is a shame because they had a good start.
Yeah, they did. I was going to say if there are more Sound of Contact albums, I would seek them out. Sadly, it sounds like this is the one and done, but
Yeah,
highly, highly recommended people.
yeah,
Check it out.
definitely. All right,
Okay,
the final one.
one more from 1971, the double LP called Chilliwack. This is my favorite of the bunch. And it's my favorite of the bunch because it never ceased to surprise and delight about what was happening there. I mean, there are spots in this album that sound like 1971 AM radio fodder. And
Like
there's
right.
spots in here that are just wildly creative. I don't know what my expectations were, but this exceeded them in every respect. I mean, I don't, I have to go back and listen to how you and Bill, talk about Chilliwack. But to me, this sounds like a bunch of hippie stoner musical prodigies, really just cutting loose. There are tunes in here, there's stuff that's Beatles-ish. There's stuff on the next tune sounds like it's from the John Fahey, Leo Kottke, type of, guitar exploration book. There's a Zeppelin-esque ballad to me that closes out side one. You turn the record over to side two, it sounds like a Native American drenched, reel.
Yeah.
And then there's this great guitar jam, and then through to some kind of psychedelic ending. I mean, it's just this album was just like I said, it was an incredibly delightful surprise, and I really really liked it.
You're welcome.
Side three, yeah, yeah, music for a quiet time. Um, Boy, do I love that. That was just so fun to kind of listen to. And again, there's parts of it are very Native American. Maybe it's North American Indian, given that these guys were Canadian. So, um, but there's like, claps and chants and whistle, there's and antiphony going on in the music. There's these droning guitar solos, and it's just this completely immersive, wonderful experience. Side four, the night morning part. I wish I had more notes to go on that, but again, the whole thing was just a delightful surprise, and the the only thing that's keeping me from pushing the buy button is just time and attention to do that because I would really like to own this one. It was really really fun, and um, I get this is their second album, right, Armando?
Yes, it's their second album, self-titled. Their first album is still available, self-titled. But this is the
Okay.
one that people tend to go to in terms of a launching pad for the band. The band started out in 1967 under the name of the Classics. Then they changed their name to the Collectors before settling on Chilliwack. And Bill Henderson, lead vocalist, has been the mainstay of the band ever since their inception. Um, in the 80s, the early 80s, they've had a sorry, excuse me. They've had a pretty much a revolving door of
Uh-huh.
roster of members. The guitars that they had in the early late 70s, early 80s, Brian Too Loud McLeod, basically took over the band in terms of musical direction, and they had hits with the one album "Wanna Be a Star" with "My Girl," "Gone, Gone, Gone," and "What You Gonna Do." Their
Hmm.
last album released with Brian Too Loud McLeod was called Opus 10. Um, and they would release one more album after that before breaking up, which was more of a Hall and Oates kind of pop thing going on, like Blow Up
Mm.
the Hole. But eclecticism with this album of Chilliwack's is the key. Um,
Yeah. And
eclecticism all
in
the
case
way.
people are seeking this out, I mean, I know you're going to put the cover artwork up there.
Of course.
This kind of suffers from the Chicago syndrome, where if you're unfamiliar with it, Chicago, the first couple albums are called Chicago, and they're both doubles.
Yes.
The good news here for Chilliwack is that their first album is is a single LP by the looks of it that's only got 7 songs.
Yeah.
The one we're talking about here from 71 is a double album where it looks like side three is a multi-part suite,
Yes.
and side two is changing reels, and that's it's like a 14-minute tune all on its own.
Yes.
um
Yes.
but yeah, art, I'm looking at Discogs right now. Chilliwack is described as art rock, classic rock, hard rock, blues rock, psychedelic rock, and prog rock.
Well, yeah, it's got to be said.
And
The lead-off track, Lonesome Mary, was a top 10 hit in Canada. And it's still
mhm,
played on classic rock radio today, on FM rock radio today. It's still played.
yeah.
Any time of the day, it'll be on K97 here in Edmonton.
Mhm.
So it's still played today. They are, know, um, they're staples in Canadian classic rock. Chilliwack is. So they've had albums released all through the 70s into the 80s, and
Yeah.
they're still touring today, unfortunately, as a nostalgia act kind of thing. But
Yeah.
this album, the second self-titled album, and is the one that people go to as a launching pad. The first one was released on Parrot Records, which was a
Yep.
subsidiary of London Records. Now, Parrot Records is the same company that had Tom Jones and Engelbert
Mm,
Humperdinck
mm, mm.
on their roster. So when you have an album from a band like Chilliwack, they really didn't know how to market this band, so they were quickly dropped from Parrot. They were signed to A&M, and the rest is pretty much history, you know. But yeah, this is the one album that people really tend to gravitate towards in terms of an official release from the band, the
Yep.
launching pad, as it were. So,
I am all in on this record. I just really think it's fantastic. I mentioned, John Fahey and Leo Kottke. There's a Zeppelin-esque type tune. There's lots of North American, Native American kind of sounds going on in this record.
mhm,
Um, in that respect, just given how this stuff is coming out of left field, I would call it kind of Zappa-esque. Um, just in terms of the overall vibe, maybe a Zappa record like, Waka Jawaka or something like that,
mhm.
or the Grand Wazoo. But yeah, I was just very happy to listen to this one, and like I said, I'm just hovering over the purchase click link.
I get it if I were you. I mean, it's a slab of classic Canadian rock.
Yep, absolutely.
Well,
However, having said that, Armando, there
yeah,
aren't many things that you wouldn't get.
true,
True.
true. But I digress. Over
Oh,
to
I
Ken.
digress.
Over to Ken. What we You said you listened to
Well,
some.
wait, to
Sorry,
close out,
sorry.
I was just going to say I didn't know if Ken, you wanted to add any more to Armando's buried treasures.
That's
Not
what I
at
was
this
going to
time,
ask.
maybe later. Yeah.
Maybe
Maybe on the
later.
next video. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Armando, for recommending these. I mean, the rediscovering Dimensionaut, Chilliwack's fantastic, and the Gowan FM Max Webster experiences. They're not bad. I had some issues with them, but I didn't. I don't look back to this as wasted time at all. So thank you.
Well, you know what? You're very welcome, and thank you for your contributions and recommendations. Now, if you see, the thing is, if you had said, "Oh, I love everything on this list," the show would be over in 2 minutes. It'd be boring. Do you know what I mean? There has to be a bit of contrast going on. So I like that.
Yeah.
That.
Mhm.
Now, Ken, did you have a list that you wanted to give us?
Sure.
Okay.
All right. I'll try to be very succinct. Um, I'm going to go chronologically. Um, for this first artist, um, what do these three things have in common? How Long by Ace, Tempted by Squeeze, and The Living Years by Mike and the Mechanics.
Paul Carrick on lead vocals.
There you go. Paul Carrick's second album, 1982 Suburban Voodoo, um, produced by Nick Lowe. And that is probably why, um, one of the main reasons I bought this album when it first came out. It's a simple album, but it's just one of those new wave-ish, mostly upbeat. It's definitely an album of its time. Um, there's some critics at the time that called it a Nick Lowe album with Paul Carrick on lead vocals. Okay, fair enough, but it's still darn good. It's the musicians they use this they dubbed the band Noise to Go, and they toured with Nick and Carrick, and actually recorded two of Nick's solo albums with this lineup. Um, it's just to me, it's just infectious. It would fall on a perfect album list for me. Um, like I said, early '80s, just a lot of fun. I don't know why it didn't catch on, more than it did at the time. So, for what it's worth. Paul Carrick, Suburban Voodoo in 1982. Now we move on to 1993, um, with an album um, by the lead singer, songwriter, and guitarist for Haircut 100, Mr. Nick Hayward. The album is called From Monday to Sunday. Um, it's his fourth studio album, 12 incredible songs. It times in at 49 minutes. And the music is very, and I don't use this term very often, very Beatle-esque. He's an incredible songwriter. Um, it's got very catchy melodies, unconventional harmonic progressions. Um, I don't remember any drastic time changes, but as far as uh, harmonically and the chords and everything, it just doesn't go where you think it's going to go. Um, it's just a good, solid pop album. It had two singles in the UK, and he produced it himself, which considering how good I think the album is, says a lot about him as a producer, as well as a guitar player, songwriter, and singer. Um, to me, this is falls under my category of feel good albums. Um, Again, another album I discovered because it was in the cutout bin of a record store. So I figured, it can't be that good. But for some reason, I bought it anyway. And it's one of my favorite albums of all time. Yeah, from Monday to Sunday, Nick Hayward. Jumping forward 3 more years to 1996, um, a solo album by the lead singer, songwriter, and guitarist from Ultravox, and I think they pronounce it Visage, I believe.
Mm.
Um,
Visage, yeah, yeah.
yeah, Midjure, his solo album Breathe. It's his fourth solo album, and
Okay.
actually, Midjure, I discovered lately, um, he did a stint with Thin Lizzy.
You
He
didn't
toured
know
with
that?
them from 79 to 80 and was on their EP called New Day. And I
You
did
didn't
not
know
know
that.
that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Um, but anyway, for a lot of ways, he's mostly known for being one of the originators for, Do They Know It's Christmas? Along with, a couple of others. But
Mhm.
a phenomenal guitar player and songwriter. This album takes him away from the electronica format, um, incorporating much more of his Scottish and Celtic roots and influences, both through melody and instrumentation. I mean, on this album, we've got violin, bagpipes, mandolin, accordion, the boudin, the didgeridoo, harp, cello, the hurdy-gurdy, the harmonium, the melodica, and it even has Mr. Robert Fripp on some um, tracks.
All that and a partridge in a pear tree. All that.
That's right.
Jesus.
That's right. Um, so all the instrumentation is contributes to that Celtic feeling for it. It's much more of a personal album as far as his songwriting than a lot of his other things. Um, 11 fantastic songs. He used a lot of musicians, so it's very much kind of like a Steely Dan Asia kind of setting to get these amazing soundscapes. So it's not just a single band, but he used incredible musicians and played to their strength. Um, the album is called Breathe. It's just it's refreshing, it's uplifting. Um, it's wonderful to the ear musically and lyrically too. So it fulfills on many different levels. Then we jump to 1998. This is a
Mm.
solo album from the songwriter and guitarist for Split Ends and Crowded House. Mr. Neil Finn, try whistling this. 13 songs coming in at 55 minutes. This is an incredible showcase of songwriting, also of recording and producing. Um, it came off with two wonderful singles, She Will Have Her Way and Sinner. It includes Pete Thomas, um,
From the attractions?
from the Attractions on
Mhm.
drums, and Michael Froome on organ, from Crowded House and Split Ends and other Australian bands, um, and other unbelievable musicians. It uses more modern soundscapes. For instance, it uses drum machine and programming that subtly accentuates the sound rather than dominating it. So you said like, oh, that sounds like a sample there, but it's just a little small part of the song. Um, Incredible vocal melodies, non-standard harmonic progressions that just shouldn't work, but they do. Um, as a musician, whenever I listen to this album, which is fairly often, I try to picture how this was recorded, how this guitar part is played, and it baffles me. I would have loved to have been able to see him do this album in concert and be up close because it's not something that you can just sit with just a guitar and play to the same effect. Um,
Okay.
Again, the songs are very different. He hasn't done anything like this before or since. It's different from the split ends. It's very different from his crowded house stuff. It's just very eclectic. I just can't put my finger on it. His next solo album was had a couple of similarities, but not overall. This is just a unique album. Try whistling this by Neil Finn. Um, Also, for what it's worth, the cover um, was done by Neil Young's son. So
Hmm.
there you go.
Neil Young's son?
Neil Young's son. Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I know. And finally, I'm closing out with 2013, a fantastic album that has a wonderful story behind it. From the band in the 90s that gave us Walk on the Ocean and All I Want, it's Toad the Wet Sprocket. The album is called New Constellation. This album came out 16 years after their previous studio album, Coil. Um, when they were ready and they'd been touring and whatever, they'd broken up for a while. They decided they wanted to make an album. So without a record contract, they decided they were going to raise $50,000 on Kickstarter and said, okay, well, we'll try to raise $50,000, within 6 months or whatever. They met that goal in 20 hours. And
Jeez.
before the
All right.
Kickstarter was done, they had raised more than $250,000 from
Wow.
approximately 6,300 contributors. Um,
Impressive.
yeah, very impressive. They went into the studio um, and recorded the album and released it on this, you know, little barely known name label. Um, uh, uh, and with all the original band members, I mean, they've been together since, the early 80s. Uh, and to me, this is their best overall album since Fear, the Fear album, which is the one that has Walk on the Ocean and All I Want. Um, 11 songs on the album, and actually they recorded five more um, that were available to the Kickstarter contributors. So 15 or 16 songs recorded overall. The album runs a full 45 minutes of really good stuff. The performance is, um, it performed very well on at least four of the US album charts. In the top 200 as an alternative album, as an indie album, it did fairly well on the charts. I'm not sure how well it did sales wise because it was on an independent label. Um, but it was available, especially through downloading and whatever. Um, to me, it's a perfect example of just premium, unique songwriting. It's pop, but it's not popular. I know. I think the
I like
term
that
you talk
description.
about pop songs, I think was derived from the term popular. Um, but the it's got catchy melodic vocals, incredible harmonies, and outstanding instrumentation and playing, which is very consistent for Toad. Um, they're one of my all-time favorite bands, and so to come right out of nowhere in 2013, a lot of bands that make comebacks. For me, I listen to the new albums, and it's like, they shouldn't have bothered. But for this
Yeah,
knocked it out of the ballpark after 16 years. Also, the thing about um, their recordings is that they are easily and they are produced very accurately live. In other words, what you
Mm.
hear in the studio is what you're going to hear, on stage too, which I think is a very positive thing. Um, and I don't know, but I suspect that probably um, the recording of this album was mostly live, if not completely live. I can tell, there's some dubbing on it, but it's very subtle. But they've been releasing recently some videos YouTube of some of their most popular songs, just standing there in the engineering room of a recording studio, and it's like, guess what? It sounds just like the album. It's absolutely amazing. Um, the songs are fantastic. To me, they're always very catchy. I also consider this a band that to me is Beatle-esque as far as melodies, very catchy melodies. Um, um, to me, their sound has a specific sound to it, but not because it has a specific sound without the song sounding the same. If you get what I'm saying, they're
I
not
Sure.
get what you're saying.
rehashing. They're
I
not
get what you're saying.
rehashing the same song over and over again.
I understand. Yeah.
And but anyway, I recommend to anyone, Toad the Wet Sprocket in general, but for a comeback album, New Constellation in 2013, yeah, that just really knocks it out of the park, and I think the story behind it is just fascinating.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It really
Just
is.
just to um continue what you were saying about bands that get reunite and release new albums, and you think, hmm, okay, why bother? I understand what you're saying by that. The the latest Just Hotel album that's coming out March 7th,
Uh-huh.
which, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I pre-ordered. It's on its way um, on Amazon.ca. Now, I've listened to the
This
title
is my
track.
shocked face.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, for 24.95, it's a good deal.
There
Now,
you go.
um, I've listened to the title track of the new Just Hotel, and vocally, Ian Anderson obviously cannot hit the notes anymore. He was dealing with COPD, and he can't hit the notes. But musically, it is spot on. It is fantastic.
Oh,
It
good.
is uh, heavy. It is melodic. It hits all the notes. So,
Mhm.
Cool.
but I can't say that with with their last two albums, with Rock Flute, etc. And the one before. So,
Good to know.
the Zealot gene. Um, so I understand what you're saying when bands reunite and they try, I guess, recapture what they've done before, but there's just something missing. There's an element missing that you can't place your finger on it, and it drives you up a proverbial wall. Like you can't figure it
Right.
out.
Yeah, it's
So
true.
I will check out these albums. Like I've heard of Tour the White Sprocket. Bill's mentioned them before to me, and I know of them, but I really need to dig into their output more, their music. So I will. along with the rest of the ones you've recommended for the next episode.
I've put together a intro playlist on Spotify I'll send to you.
Okay. All right. So, any more comments, Jim, or in?
I look forward to listening to all of these, especially Toad. There's just something about the way that they crafted their songs, and Glenn Phillips' voice is just so smooth and buttery. I just look forward to hearing that again.
Yeah, and there is something to be said for just because something is good doesn't mean it's going to sell. Um, in terms
Oh,
of
sure.
albums that go under the radar, like the release from To the Red Spark from 2013. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Buried Treasures, Episode 3, Jim's Musically Schizophrenic Reaction. Now, I want to thank Jim and Ken for joining me on this musically schizophrenic journey. And we will be back with Episode 4 of Buried Treasures to close this out with Ken's recommendations and our reactions to those recommendations. Okay. So for Ken Cheshire and Jim Bricker, I'm Armando Venditti signing off. Please look after yourselves and one another. Please click like and subscribe, and do hit the notification button to keep yourselves on top of any new content I've got coming up. What's coming up on the channel? Before we went to record, we have decided that Jim and Ken will be joining me on a reshooting of episode 3 of Is This a Masterpiece, focusing on the sixth release from Steely Dan, one album by the name of Asia. I do believe you've heard of it. So we will be bringing that episode to you as soon as we possibly can. I'm ready to go. It's up to these individuals whenever they want to film it. But for now, we will say goodbye and hope you guys are looking after yourselves and one another. We'll see you soon with more episodes. Bye for now.